So everyone, welcome to the Best Places to Lead show. I'm your host, Derrick McManus. Thank you so much for coming. Let me just break down the show for you because, Alex Sanfilippo, who we had last week on the show, who's this amazing podcaster, 2 top 20 podcasts, built a SaaS company to 27,000 members. He said, you should really tell people about the show so they're prepared for it. So Derrick and I are going to talk for like 30 to 45 minutes. And the reason we do it as a live show is so that you can ask questions. And so Derrick is this amazing human being, is the best way I can say it, an amazing human being. We were putting pressure on him before we let you all in the room about how excited I was to have him as a guest. So if you have any questions, we're going to be able to bring you on and you guys can ask him the questions directly and in the chat. So in the chat, tell us where you're from. If it's your first time here, I just saw Carol Ann, super fan, is in the house. I think Carol Ann has made it to every single show. So beyond my wife, another great super fan to have in the house. So, and if you're not driving, I don't know. There's people. Carrie Dilly, get your video on. I need to see your mug. Right? We're always better together. So let's see who you are. There he is. Carrie Dilly is in the house. It's fun, fantastic times. I love to see you, buddy. Thanks for coming. So listen, I know people who have burned themselves. I know people who have cut themselves, but I don't know anyone who's been shot. And our guest today is Derrick McManus. He's a special forces operative, as you'll hear from his accent. He is from Australia. Derrick was shot 14 times in 5 seconds, and he couldn't be rescued for over 3 hours. The doctors continue to be amazed at how he had any life left in him because he had no blood left in him. And so those are the doctor's words, not ours. And so today we're going to obviously, the incident that happened to Derrick is the foundational piece, but we really want to talk about the thing and the impact that he's been able to make post the event, because that's really what we're here for. I work with leaders, and the reason that we built this show was, how do we help leaders create more compelling companies that outperform? Because the reality of it is, one thing that I've seen is great leaders do 2 things better than anyone else. They take action differently, right? That's one piece. And the second is they have incredible mindsets that enable them to get to the other side of hard things. And so I can't imagine a better instructor on this topic than Derrick. And so Derrick, thank you so much for being here. We're super pumped up to have you. It looks like we got 24 people in the room. People keep on popping in and out, but we'll have a good crowd here today. Talk to me a little bit about special forces. It's a very dangerous place, right? And so how did you prepare yourself for the risks and the choices that you were making?
Okay, so for everybody's background, special forces is essentially associated with the military. I was a police officer in South Australia, and as a police officer, I was trained as a sniper, as an underwater recovery diver, but I was also trained by counterterrorism, and I was trained by the equivalent of your Navy SEALs. So we have the Australian Special Air Services here. They are the Black Ops guys. They go in behind enemy lines. They deal with all the terrorist incidents. And I was trained by them in counterterrorism to bring back to the police to deal with it on a civil basis. So we were always the first responders if ever there was a terrorist incident. And I've been a police officer for about 10 years prior to joining the Special Forces area. And our Special Forces area, we called it STAR Group, Special Task and Rescue. And we were responsible for the resolution of all sorts of high-risk incidents. So high-risk arrests, hostage siege, counter-terrorism. When the Queen came to visit South Australia, we were the close quarter security for her. We did cave rescue, cliff rescue, mine rescue, helicopter operations, drug busts, all those sorts of things. It's the stuff that I absolutely found passionate. I loved it. My mother had a slightly different opinion of it, but you know, that's fine. To prepare myself for it, there was certainly intense training within the police department, and any sort of policing, military are going to have intense. But when you go into that special ops area, it's even more intense. We had training 1 week out of 4. So 25% of our time operational was spent training. So it's very intense training. We were training for everything. But we trained physically and we trained mentally in the special operations. There's a third area of training ourselves emotionally, which I think is the one that great leaders have. Certainly the physical, we had to be physically fit. We had to be capable of doing all the jobs that we've been asked to do. The mental, I talk about that as the intellectual side of preparation. So policies, procedures, the actual practice of what you need to do to manage situations, understanding the steps that are necessary. But the emotional is the mindset one. And there's something that happens in our minds that when our emotions and our rational thinking sit on an even plane, then we can get creative, we can think through arguments, we're kind of relaxed. When these are on an even plane, that's where we are. It's just easy. This is nice. This is great. We can get creative and all those sorts of things. But as soon as we start getting overwhelmed by things that are not going the way we want, they're going out of control. It's bigger, it's faster, it's more scary than what I've prepared for. Our emotions will start going high and our rational thinking will go low. And this is when I love having discussions with people, because what is it that happens when our emotions go low? And I've asked anybody to throw something into the chat. What do you think it is that happens when our emotions go low? Where is your thinking at that particular time? Because this is not when we're doing the smart thinking. This is when we're doing the dumb thinking. This is fight and flight. This is absolute panic. And you know what it's like when you're in a situation where it's out of control. And the easiest one to relate to is if you've got a partner or even children, and you're starting to have this discussion, this argument with the children or the wife, and you're trying to make your point and it's not coming across and you don't know what's going wrong. And then you bark out that statement and you go, no, I didn't mean that. That's not what I meant to say. That's because the rational thinking is down here. Now, it's not about saying, okay, we've got to cut out the emotion, because that's how I was trained 30 years ago when I joined the police. And this is a gender-based statement that I'm about to make, and I apologize for it, but it's the thinking that was back there. It was the way we were trained. Men don't have emotions. That's a girl thing, right? And as we all know now, men have as much emotion as ladies do. So it's not about cutting out the emotion. We can't. But we've got to have a process in mind as to how we bring the emotion back down so we can bring the rational thinking back up. And it may not get onto an even plane again, but the closer that we can get them, the more chance we've got of being able to make those decisions. We can go, I was proud of that. That's what I wanted to do. That's what I was trained to do. That was intentional. And so I think, you know, when you talk about the mindset of a leader, I think that's what it is. I understand I'm going to have emotions, but when those emotions kick in, what's the behavior I can put in place to bring the emotion down?
Rachel will attest to this, but I have never had one of those moments in our relationship together over 15 years. And so I'm not certain what you're talking about. Derrick, I think that's a great explanation of like the physiology of how our minds work. And, you know, I say Mother Nature got a handful of things wrong. That's one of them, that when we need to be really smart and we're in that fight or flight moment, you know, toxins get dumped into our brain and we make poorer decisions. I think the other one is that it takes me an hour to burn 600 calories and I eat one cookie, and, you know, that takes 30 seconds and I'm back on the even keel. That is not fair. But like, how do you do that? Like, so we understand that's what we should be doing. How to like get ourselves back into an even place. But how do you physically do that?
Okay, so I'm just reaching for a little model here, and I'm only going to flash this up very quickly. This is what I call my model for human durability. Okay, and the thing that I really want you to focus on is that golden circle around the outside. Okay, because that underpins everything. That golden circle is about open, honest, confronting conversations And they have to be had with ourselves first, and then the people around us. The open, honest, confronting conversation has got to be about the reality of the choices we're making and the possible consequences of those choices. And open, honest, confronting conversations don't have to be harsh or anything like that. They're done with care, concern, and for a driven, positive outcome. So for me, it was a reality of going, actually, do you know something? I'm joining Star Group. I'm going to be a sniper. I'm going to be a diver. I'm going to be in counter-terrorist incidents. I'm going to be facing guns on a regular basis in the hands of angry people. There's a reality I may be shot and injured. I may be shot and killed. I had to have that conversation with myself and say, am I prepared to put myself into that situation? Do I think I've got the training? Do I think I've got the experience? Do I think I've got the people around me? And I didn't have it before I joined Star Group, but I knew that when I got in there, I was going to get that training before I was thrown into those situations. I'd already been a cop for 15 odd years, so I'd already had some exposure to it. I knew they'd give me the extra training. But I then had to go and talk to my wife, because she's going to be the person that's most impacted by my choice and my action of going into Star Group. And I said to her, do you realise that there's a possibility I'll be shot and injured or could be shot and killed? I had to have her, in my mind, she had to know the reality of it as well. And the questions that I had for her is that if I die, what's your life going to look like? Because it wasn't just about me. It was about her, and I wanted her to look at her future if I died. And it wasn't about me giving her permission for anything, but it was just about having that conversation about what's that future maybe look like. Does she go on and get married and find somebody else to look after our children? Does she stay single and just look after the children herself? And it wasn't about giving her permission, but the worst thing for me would be that I died on the job and she went through life going, oh, should I get married or not? What would people think of me? What would Derrick want? So let's have clarity, absolute clarity about that thinking behind it. And as I say, done with care, compassion, concern. So I actually threw her a third option. She could stay single, she could go and get married, she could go and get married, or she could build a little shrine in the corner and just worship me every day. That one apparently wasn't popular, but so, confronting conversations don't have to be harsh. They can be just comfortable conversations, and we break the tension, but then stay on that matter still. So that was part of it. And then once I'd had that conversation with her, I then went away for myself, and I said, if I get shot and I don't die, what does the future look like? On one end of a continuum, it was absolute perfection. I get shot, and I get shot just a little bit. And the injury isn't massive, and I'm able to get over it and go back to work and all those sorts of things. On the other end is absolute chaos, where the injury is big. I only ever pictured myself getting shot once, not 14 times, so maybe I don't have a good imagination. I don't know. But it was when it's in chaos, what's going to be happening in my mind? And this is a very specific thought for me. What's going to be happening in my mind, and how do I manage my mind so that I can put into action the things that I need to do to give myself the best chance of survival? And that's the essential part of human durability. It's not about resilience, it's about going beyond resilience to how do we sustain optimal performance when we're in absolute chaos. And a lot of that comes down to that emotional preparation. We've got to have the physical, we've got to have the intellectual, but when we can control our minds as well, then we've got greater chance of having the outcome that we want.
I'm hearing two things, right? One is because leaders have to do that. Sometimes we have to have hard conversations that are uncomfortable, and we have to confront reality. And so every time we kick that can down the way, we keep that loop open and it weighs on us. Any tips on how to have that conversation other than it's the right thing to do, and so you have to have that conversation? It's one thing to know that might be your reality. It's another to face it and to verbalize it. I may get shot. I may get killed.
Yeah, absolutely. So How many people, and just show of hands from people that have actually got their cameras on, who's been in a committee, right? And that committee has been put together to solve a problem or to find a solution or whatever. And we get into that committee and we have discussions, and people are putting up ideas as to what we can do, what we can't do. And we're having arguments and discussions and debates. But everybody knows there's the elephant in the corner of the room that everybody goes, but nobody's talking about that. Surely somebody's going to bring that up eventually, and nobody does. And when you walk out of that room, everybody's going, well, we're prepared. But what if that happens? Nobody's discussed this. And it is about talking about the elephant in the room, because I say there are two levels of comfort that come out of having the discussion about the elephant in the room. And for me, being shot was the elephant in the room. Let me just digress a little bit to that. I have spoken to police around the world, and there is only about 1% of police officers who have the discussion with their partner. If I get shot and I die, what's your life going to look like? If I get shot and I'm injured, what does the future look like after that? Everybody knows it's there. We walk around with our guns on our hips. We deal with angry people all the time. Everybody knows it's there, and everybody goes, they'll know what to do. They know the risk we're taking. But if you don't talk about it, in fact, Nelson Mandela says, we can't prepare for the future. We can't prepare for the future if we're secretly pretending it's not going to happen. And that's what the elephant in the room is. So by having these discussions, I believe there are two levels of comfort. And this is what the mindset of a leader should be, is that the first level of comfort that comes from it is, my gosh, that's scary. If that happens, it could destroy the company. Maybe it'll scare people away from making the right decision. But when we take a look at our resources, our training, our experience, our exposure, the team around us, the infrastructure, and then we suddenly realize that actually, as scary as that is, as big as that is, we've actually got the ability to manage it. And yes, it will take a knock from it, but we'll be able to deal with it. Okay, now we're going forward comfortably. We're going forward courageously. And we're making bold decisions that other people go, wow. Because we've got that confidence, even if the worst happens, we can manage it. The second level of comfort, and this is another big one for leaders, is that by doing the analysis, we can say, we've got the resources, we've got the infrastructure. Actually, we don't have the experts in place. We don't have the appropriate people. Maybe we don't have the resources. There's a gap there that we need to fill before we can do this. And so you can actually comfortably walk away from that, but you can articulate the reason why. It's not, oh, it doesn't feel right. I'm not sure. I'm a little bit nervous about this. No, we are walking away because of these reasons. And then when your team is able to listen to that, they'll go, oh, okay, that makes sense. And they will have more confidence in the leader. Not everybody's going to agree with your reasons, by the way. You can't please all of the people all of the time. But when you can articulate those reasons, at least there's something to discuss. And in Star Group, when we were going into a high-risk incident, it was a matter that doesn't matter whether somebody had been in the section for 5 years, 5 days, 5 minutes. If we were going into an operation and there was something in a person's mind where they go, oh, there's a bit of a risk there, I'm not sure about it, they were required to put their hand in there and say, boss, what about this? Because again, there's two things that will come out of it. Either the boss will say, hey, actually, good point, I hadn't thought about that one. Yes, we need to incorporate this to handle that. Or the boss will say, no, I've considered that, thanks very much, I've considered that. And if that happens, this is what we've got in place. That clarifies it for that person. He's no longer worried about it, right? And he is completely focused on the job that he's been asked to do. So it's having those discussions is powerful.
I think you hit on something that's super powerful, which is sometimes people don't want to call something out. And the reality of it is, you know, I've run 5 different businesses, 5 different industries, B2B, B2C. I've never been the technical leader. And so I tell people all the time, raise your hand. If you see something, I have a million blind spots, and you have to have the confidence to tell the people around you, I'm not going to see it all. And that's okay. But the analogy that I give when people see that there's going to be a train wreck that's going to happen and they don't say anything, and then they say something after the fact, like, oh, I knew that was a bad idea. It was headed down the wrong way. I said, if you and your friend were standing on the curb in New York City and they took a step out because they weren't paying attention and a bus was coming, what would you do? You would grab them by the neck and you would pull them back. That's what great leaders do. We make sure that people who are in our care and those people around us have the confidence to know we take care of each other. We don't just let someone get run over by the bus and go like, they should have been paying attention, or I saw that bus coming, I didn't do anything about it. And so that's helping to build those high performance teams. And yet, as the leader, you need to drop your ego to be able to be open to hear and to listen to the ideas from the people around you. And a lot of times, ego is always the enemy. Ryan Holiday, one of my favorite authors, talks about that, has a whole book about it, one of my favorite books. And ego is the enemy. If we have not connected our people to what the end mission is and what the end goal, and given them permission to have a voice and to participate and have influence in the organization, boy, are we missing the opportunity to unlock the potential around all of us, because now it's just, the head of the organization needs to take care of everything. No way, not in the world that I live in.
Completely agree, completely agree. I talk about three things that get in our way of making a good decision, and ego is the number one. Ego, pride, and self-importance. Now, we know that they're all the same things, but people relate to the words in different ways. Yep. To be in Star Group, and let me just clarify, ego is often seen as a dirty word, right? But no, it's not. We've actually got to have ego. I couldn't go into Star Group unless I had the ego, the self-confidence, the pride that I can take on a difficult situation that other people would run away from. And I believe I would have some chance of success in that. There's an ego behind that. That's ego driven. So ego will take us a long way, but ego will also get in our way unless we have vulnerability as well. And that's what you were discussing there, that vulnerability to go, I don't see everything. Please tell me what I'm not seeing. And if a leader can listen to his team, and that's why we're a team, because everybody should be having input. If the leader can't listen to the team, then you're a team of one barking out orders to somebody else, right? So
Amen.
Or supported by vulnerability, and the more ability you have, the more you should be vulnerable, and it's the insecure leader that can't listen to his team because they have so much self-doubt that they go, I've got to look as if I'm the expert, and that's when you start getting the micromanagers.
One of the things I want to go back to was you were talking about this equilibrium of emotion and logic. Yeah. So walk me through, you've been shot 14 times. You're now laying on the ground. They can't come and rescue you for 3 hours. What's the conversation you're having with yourself to remain in an optimal performance state? Because I just can't imagine that situation and being able to keep myself in anywhere close to an equilibrium state.
So this is the peace of mind that comes out of addressing the elephant in the room, right? I knew there was a real possibility that I may be shot and injured, I may be shot and killed. I knew that if I get shot, then my mind is going to want to do one thing, my body is going to want to do another. And so I thought through that. If I get into that situation, how am I going to be able to manage it? And I knew that there were 4 things that I needed to do. One was control panic, not let panic take control of the situation. I needed to control shock, the body's response to sudden impact and sudden event that overwhelms us. I needed to slow down my heart rate, and I needed to slow down my breathing. Now, this isn't thinking that I did in the moment of when I got shot. It's thinking that I did beforehand, right? So that at the time I get shot, I didn't have to go, oh, let me get creative here. What do you think I should do now? Because that's the essence of flexibility. oh, I found this situation. How can I be flexible? How can I manage it? So by doing the thinking beforehand, when it happens, I was actually able to have the agility of, I know what to do. I've thought this through. I'd been in so many actual training scenarios which were similar to being shot, that I'd been able to think through, what was my emotion like at that time? How was I able to control my mind and my body? And prior to getting shot, I'd been in other incidents in the police where somebody had tried to shoot my partner and I. It was very close quarters. We got into a wrestling match with this guy who's armed with a gun. He pointed it at my partner's chest, pulled the trigger, but the weapon was broken. The hammer actually had to be pulled back so that it could be fired. And we got into this wrestling match, and as we're wrestling, he's called out to his girlfriend, cock the gun, cock the gun. And in the middle of this wrestling match, she's reached in, she's cocked the gun, and I put my hammer between the gun and the hammer to hold the hammer back so it couldn't be fired. That thinking didn't happen in that moment. We've been playing scenarios before. What if? Hypotheticals. If you get into this situation, what are your options? That was one of the options that was suggested at 3 a.m. in the morning when we were sitting around having coffee and having these discussions. And so when I went into Star Group, I started doing that thinking as well. If I get into that situation, what would be my mindset? I was so relaxed at the time of the shooting that when I actually got shot, this guy started shooting. He fired 18 times with an SKK Chinese military weapon. For those of you who do know a little bit about weapons, it was a 7.62 or 308 caliber. He fired 18 times in less than 5 seconds, hit me 14 times. When I first started getting hit, I had absolutely no idea what was happening to me. I didn't feel the impact. I didn't hear the sound of the gunfire. All I knew was I was suddenly falling to the ground, and I started cursing myself. You know, time is slowing down, and as I'm falling, I'm able to curse myself. You idiot, what's going on? Because I haven't felt the impact, I haven't heard the sound. And as I was falling to the ground, I saw these small round holes that hadn't been there a moment before. And then I heard the sound of gunfire. Still haven't felt any impact. And as I'm falling to the ground, I'm going, small round holes, sound of gunfire, you're falling for seemingly no reason. Actually, Derrick, you're probably being shot. That makes sense. Okay, so don't be too hard on yourself, because if you're getting shot, it's quite acceptable to fall over. So I was going through that level of thinking. But I then dropped to the ground, laying on my back, my feet pointing in the direction of where the bullets are coming from, head facing away. And as I was lying here, the shooter was still shooting me. 2 bullets hit my left thigh. And I felt the impact, not the pain, just an impact. It was like a sledgehammer hit my thigh, no pain, but I felt this shock wave going up through my body and then coming back down. And then I felt the second one hit my body, shock wave up, shock wave down. It seemed to take 30 seconds. And in this 30 seconds, I was abusing myself again. How can I lie here? So I knew I needed to fire back. But as I went to fire back, I realized I'm lying on my back, my feet are at the other end of my body. And when your feet are at the other end of your body and you're lying on your back, which way do your feet point? You know, they're pointing up in the air. And I knew I needed to get up just that little bit. But I've got a flak vest on, I've got weaponry equipment on my upper body, very, very heavy on my upper body. And as I've lifted my upper body up, my feet have come up to counterbalance. And the thought that ran through my head was, I'd better not shoot myself in the foot, because the guys at work will give me shit for the rest of my life. I get shot 14 times and then I shoot myself as well. But that's the thinking that was going through my mind. So for anybody who has been in a situation that they are well prepared for, you know that you can be looking at this situation and you can be having other thoughts. You know, oh, actually, what are the kids doing at the moment? Will this impact? Oh, no. But it doesn't distract you from what you need to do. And that's because we're not panicking. We're able to control shock. Control shock is when we relax our mind enough to get the blood flow happening so that it doesn't go to the major organs for fight and flight. It comes back to the frontal lobe where we do our higher level thinking, the higher intellect thinking, the creativity, the problem solving, because that's where we need our blood, right? When the amygdala kicks in and cuts that blood off, it only reignites the frontal lobe when we start to relax, when we don't think that there is something to be scared of. And so that was the thinking that went through my mind. It was the pre-planning that gave me the ability to be agile in that moment. And I was able to have those thoughts outside the square while still doing everything that I needed to do. And we all see this in leaders. These are the really good leaders are those people who can be in a horrible situation, but they're just going, okay, I know what to do. Can you go and manage this? Can you bring in this? Rather than go, oh my gosh, what's going on? Because we've seen those leaders as well.
Before we did the show, you and I spoke, and I said that I so identify with your mindset. In fact, I did episode 5, which is the 9 principles of personal performance. And part of that is we can have a great vision for the world, but if our skills don't match our ambitions, then we need to continue to level up what it is that we're doing. And it's just that level of preparedness, that intellectual curiosity to say, I need to be prepared for any opportunity that might come my way, even when I don't know what that is or how it might come. And it was interesting, when I was getting prepped for this, I went back to an early version of some of my writing. And I actually, I used the working title, The 9 Principles of Personal Performance, but the title that I had used was The Prepared Opportunist, because over the course of my career, I couldn't know that I was going to run a construction company and a tech company and a manufacturing company. And I've just always been intellectually curious to get myself to a place of performance, because the world is unknown. And so you have to constantly be prepared to go engage in the world.
So just picking up on those words, my skills don't match the challenge that I'm about to take on. That's only going to come out if you're prepared, you're vulnerable enough to talk about that elephant in the room, that actually, I want to do this, I'm passionate about it, everybody's watching me, I'm saying I'm going to do it, but honestly, I don't have the skills. I need to step back and say, these are the skills I'm going to take on or prepare myself for, or find an expert to help me so that I can come back and take it on appropriately. And there's a whole lot of vulnerability when other people are looking at you and judging you. But that's the skill of a good leader. Being able to say, my skills don't match that challenge. Okay, what do we need to do to sort that before we put ourselves in that level of risk?
I say it all the time. My personal mission is to positively impact 5 million people over the next 5 years through better business, because I believe leaders get in the way of great people doing great work, because no one I know has ever shown up to work and said, I really want to suck today. And yet so many people do. And it's the leader's fault. And so how do we create environments that, stoke performance and invest in people and love your people more than anyone else? And it's part of what I just love about your mindset and your thinking, because it cuts across all things. It's not just business thinking or leaders thinking. This is 10-year-old kids. This is every walk of life, CEOs. And so I just love that it's applicable to everything and everyone. So one thing that I will say, if you guys have questions, and Molly, I'm going to bring you on if that's okay. I'm going to let you ask your question. But if you guys have questions, please put it in on the chat, and we will get you in here to ask Derrick any question. You can take yourself off mute.
And let me just speak to that. A lot of people go, oh, I'd really love to know about what was, but I can't ask that. That's not nice to ask that. That's too deep to ask that. No, there is no question that I rule out. I love every question. I've had people ask me questions on stage in front of 500 people, where I'm going, actually, great question. I haven't been asked that one before. Just give me a moment to think about that. Okay, I want to answer. And I love that deep dive, because, and again, this is the elephant in the room. If one person wants to ask that question, generally speaking, there's another 5 that want to ask it as well, but everyone's going, not sure. Ask away. I love the deeper we go into the questions, the more I enjoy it. Amen. So throw them in there.
My question was just, so you talked a lot about like leadership training and being prepared by being trained, but I wondered if you believe that leadership and durability is something that you can be naturally born with versus just trained on.
I actually think as people, we are born with all the skills we need to get through life. It's only as we grow, we start to hear other people and our parents saying, oh, don't do that, it's too dangerous. Don't do that because, you know, all these things, and we get scared about it. And then there's another period of life where we might try to do something because we're ego driven. I'm trying to prove something. I'm trying to look good to someone. And we take risks that we really shouldn't take, and they don't go well. So out of those bad experiences, we go, well, no, I'm not going to do that again because people laughed at me. So I think we have all the skills we need. We just get them trained out of us. So I believe that we can train people to be more durable, to be more resilient, to be able to manage failure, because it is just a mindset, and it's just about managing failure. Is a lot about how passionate you are about achieving the objective. If it's something that's important to you and you're acting with congruence with what's important to you, then we're more driven to achieve it. If it's not something that's really important to you, if you're just being told you need to do this, you're more likely to give up. But and that's what I do these days. I run workshops, half days, full days, 2 days, and those sort of things on the mindset and building that durability. And I've got to be honest, most of it is about breaking down those conversations inside our head that say, you're an idiot, I can't do that, okay, I don't have the skills of those other people. And it's that mindset that really needs to be broken. And then, as Jerry was saying, it's getting into the head of people and going, actually, I'm vulnerable enough to say, I don't have that skill, I need to go away and build it. Having those open, honest, confronting conversations is not something we're trained to do. So I think we have the skills innately, but sometimes it gets trained out of us. Great question.
I think the other piece of that, Molly, because you asked about leadership and durability. So I think Derrick took the durability piece of it. This is a conversation, you know, I went to school and, you know, it was a leadership school. It's the only school in the country that confers a degree in leadership studies. This was a constant conversation, whether leaders are born or they can be made. And I think, you know, my experience is there's certain DNA that makes someone an attractive character, the willingness to step forward, to make their voice known, their point of view known. And then I think there's a whole, another piece where you can level up your skills. And so leadership is a skill, just like public speaking and every other skill that you can build. I think really where people miss, where they say like, I wouldn't follow that person, is there's a lack of authenticity where they're trying to tell you to do something and their skills don't match with their ability to give you that direction. And so when there's a mismatch in that genuine nature, then it's hard to follow people for sure.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
You're welcome.
Yeah, absolute pleasure. I'm just going to talk to what you've just said there too, Jerry. What's people's greatest fear in the world? Everybody says it's public speaking, but that's what a leader does. They speak up and they articulate what's happening in their mind. And most people are scared to speak up in front of anybody. So one of the first things that I would say to people is go and do a public speaking course. Get confidence in raising your voice, using your voice. And most of that comes from being able to articulate the thoughts in a way that people can understand it. So it's not actually public speaking, it's just a methodology of how to articulate your thoughts that other people will listen to you. Because we all have those thoughts. That leader should be doing this, but as you said before, they're not willing to step up and pull you back from being in front of the bus because somebody else should be doing that. So
to that point, if there's one skill to level up on, there was a Harvard Business Review survey that went out. The #1 predictor of a person's ability to rise within an organization was directly proportional to their ability to communicate. If you can't communicate, you can't rise up inside the organization. And so it was correlated like 82% your level of communication tied to your ability to rise inside an organization. So a great tip, because I've met no leader in my life that hasn't been able to clearly articulate their thoughts. Not anyone that I would follow, not anyone that I would get behind and get excited about. So Isaiah Rosick had a question too, our friend from Denver. Isaiah, can you take yourself off mute and ask the question?
Sure. So if you find yourself in a situation where you're not even, where your emotions are starting to swing in a direction where you're not thinking clearly, you're not thinking logically, what do you do to try to bring yourself back to even where you can think more reasonably?
Again, obviously this comes a great question, really great question. And again, this is one that I haven't been asked before, so I really, really like it. But it is about being vulnerable enough to go, do you know something, I'm not prepared for this. What experiences have I had in the past that are similar to this, and how have I handled those? And this is a lot of thinking to do in the midst of a, oh my gosh, what's going on? But we've got to reflect back to say, what have I dealt with that is similar to this? And how did that go well? How did that go badly? What decisions did I make that I was proud of? Which decisions did I make that I didn't want to make, that I can bring in that learning into this situation? My preference is to have those conversations beforehand, right? So that when you get into that situation, you're already prepared. But obviously there are times when there are things that happen that we don't anticipate. Things like the Twin Towers, earthquakes, all those sorts of things that we just don't think of. So it does happen. Being vulnerable enough to say, I'm not sure what's going on here. I need to take just a moment to think this through, rather than going, everybody's looking at me, I've got to make a decision, I've got to do this. So being vulnerable enough just to take time. One of the most important things you can do to take time, and lots of people are talking about this and everybody goes, that's kind of a cliche, breathe, right? Breathe. Just take a deep breath, let your body get oxygenated, because when your body gets oxygenated, the amygdala that cuts off and puts you into the fight and flight, that goes, oh, there's lots of oxygen around the place, I can relax a little bit, and it will let that blood flow go back to the front of the brain. So that first thing is breathe, and then be vulnerable enough to say, I don't know all the answers, let me give myself a moment to get creative. If you've got other people around you that you can go, what's your thoughts? And be vulnerable enough to go, I need some ideas here. That again just breaks the tension of it. So I hope that's some answer to it. Jerry, you may have a different perspective on that as well.
Now, I think, one of my earliest mentors always said, when you're stressed, breathe, because if you can't breathe, you have a bigger problem. And
Yep.
So it just reconnects you into what it is that you're doing, and, causes you to relax. Because when we are under tension, we know from the research, the brain at positive outperforms by 31% negative, neutral, or stressed. And so you should be constantly training your mind, stay calm, stay relaxed, because I need to be in positive, because I will outperform other decisions that I will make when I'm under stress.
And, essentially that goes back to, now that I've had time to think as you're talking, Jerry, probably goes back to those 4 principles that I was saying before: control panic, control shock, the body's response to this overwhelming situation. Slow down your breathing, slow down your heart rate, because then the body is relaxed, the mind relaxes. And as soon as our mind relaxes, we can open up our thinking and see possibilities or opportunities. In fact, I say that adversity is the biggest killer of creativity, because we're so overwhelmed. But if we can break the tension of it, and some of that tension gets broken by a little bit of lightheartedness, or knowing that you've got a plan in place.
And you were sitting there walking through that, and I hadn't even thought about this, but there's a reason that I've spent 25 years behind a desk, and it's because I'm one of the least handy people I know. And I went and tried to wrangle a tree once, and I had one of those little sickle saw, and I was trying to pull a branch down because it was putting leaves into our pool. And because I'm such a klutz, the pole saw hit the ground, bounced at me, broke my glasses, and just like it just missed your femoral artery when you were shot, it just missed my whatever this one is. I don't remember what it is.
Your
carotid artery. And I literally, Derrick, it broke my sunglasses, and I looked down and I thought, I can't believe this is how I'm going to die. Because I thought for sure I had killed myself. And I looked down and I thought exactly that same thing. I thought, okay, relax, because if this thing's gushing blood, I need to get my heart rate as low as possible. And I got myself in a bit of a calm state. And thank goodness I missed my carotid artery by, the doctor said, about 1/2 inch by 3/4 of an inch.
Wow.
But I did just naturally go through that, because I know that I need to stay calm to make good decisions. And my modeling career on this side of my face ended that day. But it is interesting that you do have predispositions to know, okay, I've had a difficult situation. How do I get myself back to center so that I can make good decisions? And so I think to the point where you can put yourself in uncomfortable situations in advance of doing this, because, Derrick, we talked about this. You can't build resilience in the moment. You can't just decide, okay, right now I'm going to be resilient. No, it's all the work that you've done prior to this that sets you up to a place of staying calm and focused so that you can make better decisions. And so put yourself in a place of preparedness and uncomfortable situations. I always say my favorite word is perspective, because I think the wider and deeper perspective you cultivate, it is directly proportional to your quality of life, because you don't think you're always right. There's a million other ways to do things. And so you keep on grounding yourself in those things. And I think you put yourself at an advantage. So.
Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah.
Rachel Barnes, I'm not sure which one, because there's 7 Rachel Barnes on this call, but will the
I just
one
wanted to make sure Derrick had a lot of people here today. So I got every device in my house, and I connected myself to every device. So there's a lot. I apologize. I sent the link out to my team members, and I guess I sent them my registered link. So when they clicked on it, they all popped up. Yeah, it's interesting, Derrick. I had been trained in an emergency setting for many, many years, and I had done CPR many times in the ER and the hospital setting, but I had never really done anything outside of the setting. And when my niece started choking, she was a baby, just under 2 years old, actually just over a year old. So didn't have a ton of teeth yet, like a couple of teeth. And as she started to choke, I pretty much lost my cool until her mother handed her to me to do the Heimlich. And then I had to relax, because I was thinking through all of the things that I had to do to flip this child over and save her life. And so I had to be very gentle. I couldn't be too hard. So I had to stop for a moment and just kind of, what was that training again? Work myself through that. And while it was super, super intense in the moment, I took a break. I took a breath and just went through the motions of the Heimlich on this baby. And after about 3 or 4 of the pushes to the back and the flip over and all of those things, finally she threw up, and all of these chunks of sausage came rumbling out of her mouth. But as you think through that moment, had that been my child, I don't know if I could have stayed as cool. But nevertheless, it was a moment of high intensity that I had to talk myself down to be able to perform what it was that I needed to do or what I had been taught. So emotion drives you in those settings to push further, but also you have to rein it in. So, my question though is, once you knew you were shot and you had come to the realization of that, did you have any moment of your mind while it took time for, in that 3 hours, I'm sure you get this question a lot. What were the things that were going through your mind? Were there regrets? Were there things that you thought, okay, if I live through this, I'm going to do this differently, better, or change?
Great question. Again, a question that I haven't actually been asked specifically in that way before. There were no moments where I said I would change anything. And to kick to the end prior to giving you some more insight, after the shooting, I was assessed by the police psychologist as to whether I was able to go back into Star Group. I'd also had assessment by an exterior psychiatrist who had said that there was no PTSD, no stress, no anxiety, all those sorts of things. And we only had one meeting. And he said at that meeting that I could go back to work the next day without any reservations. This was just 3 months after the shooting. And he also said I never needed to come back and see him again. So my psychology was in a good place. Prior to the shooting, our police psychologist gave us tests every year. Being in Star Group, high intensity, high demand on our emotions. So we were tested to see whether we had PTSD or any signs of stress. So when I did the discussion with the interview with the psychologist afterwards, my question at the end of it was, you've cleared me to go back to Star Group again. Thank you for that. But you've done the testing before and you've done the testing afterwards. I want to know, has there been any change in me? And if that change has happened, I want to know what it is. Tell me how I've changed. So that was a very vulnerable want for some introspection as to what was happening to me. The answer I got is not the answer I was exactly looking for, but it's an interesting answer anyway. The psychologist just sat there hand-faced and he said, Derrick, you were crazy before, you're crazy now, there has been no change. So it's not the answer I wanted, but it was kind of confirmation that I hadn't changed, and I felt very comfortable in that myself. But this was kind of a confirmation. So for the 3 hours that I was lying on the ground, I think I had prepared myself well with those open, honest, confronting conversations, but I'd also taken responsibility for the choices that I'd made. And Jerry and I spoke about this before. I took responsibility on 4 levels. The first one, I took responsibility for my choice to put myself in those circumstances. I took responsibility for the actions that I was going to take. And that was all the things that I was going to do within Star Group. I took responsibility for the possible consequences. Now, the consequence that I was really looking forward to was all the excitement, jumping in and out of helicopters, getting to go into dangerous situations and be able to manage them. There was an adrenaline kick in there for me, but I also took responsibility for the possible negative consequences as well. But then I took responsibility for the future afterwards. And I did that before I made the final choice to say yes. So I said, if I get shot, what might the future look like? And I said to my wife, this is a discussion we had, I said, anything better than death is going to be a bonus. And even if I have to live the rest of my life in a wheelchair, so long as I'm able to interact with my children, I'm going to be the happiest man in the world. Yes, it's possibly going to be difficult. There's going to be awkward situations. It's not going to be as much fun. But mentally, so long as I'm able to interact with my children, that's my main drive for my whole life. I can find other things, and people find this quite strange that as I was lying on the ground for 3 hours, I actually started taking a look at what's the future going to look like for me. And with the injuries I had, the amount of time I was lying on the ground, I knew that I may spend the rest of my life in a wheelchair. And as I was lying on the ground, and if you can picture this, I was lying on the ground, the shooter was still shooting, bullets are pounding through bricks, there's dust falling into my eyes. When he stops shooting, I don't know whether he's reloading or whether he's running around the house. So there's all this stuff happening in my mind. But when he's shooting, I know exactly where he is, and he was in the roof of the house. So it's at these times that I could relax and start having other thoughts. And one of those thoughts was, what's the future going to look like for me? I knew there was a possibility I may spend the rest of my life in a wheelchair. And having thought about it before, that was comfortable. But as I was lying on the ground, I'm going, well, actually, that's going to be a boring life. You know, how am I going to make that interesting? And this is why I was lying on the ground. And I started thinking to myself, well, I play basketball. So if I put basketball together with wheelchair, I could play wheelchair basketball. That might be an interesting, at least it'll be something. And then for those people who know police officers, you probably know we've got a little bit of an ego that, as I say, ego is our best friend, so long as it's managed. But my ego started kicking in. I've gone, actually play basketball. I'm damn good at basketball. And if I'm damn good at basketball, I may be able to make the Paralympic team. And if I make the Paralympic team, these guys are traveling the world, and I'm not traveling the world at the moment. So that's actually not going to be too much of a bad outcome. But if you know anything about the special operations guy, if coppers have got an ego this big, special operations have got an ego this big, and my special ops ego started kicking in, and I've gone, actually, if I make the Paralympic team, and I'm able to add just a little bit more to what they're already doing exceptionally, then we may be able to make the Paralympic finals. I may end up with a gold medal as a result of getting shot. But that was as I was lying on the ground. I've taken responsibility for choice, action, consequence, and the future afterwards. And so I wasn't lying there going, woe is me. Community should be looking after me. My boss made a bad decision. No, I'd already taken responsibility for it. And I was looking to how I can build a future given the circumstances I'm now in.
I think it's so important. You know, you're talking about an internal locus of control versus an external locus of control. And the way I say that to leaders is it's Buzz Lightyear versus Eeyore, right? The world's happening to me. Oh my gosh, the sun isn't shining today versus let's go take on the world. Let's go do this. Let's go do epic things. And so being able to take that internal locus of control to say, I make an impact on the world doesn't impact me. Sure, these things happen, but I still now have a choice to choose my attitude, choose my approach, all of those pieces. And it is all related to higher performance. You know, conversely, external locus of control is related to low performance, depression, all of the other pieces that no matter what I do, I'm doomed to this fate. Yep. And so it is a key and critical element of making sure that you stay in that moment of choice. I did this, I own it, and now what's my path forward? Tell me a little bit about, because when I look at grit, guts, and resilience, which is related to durability, but you have taken this to the next level, you've changed some of my thinking. You know, I always find that it stems from a commitment to your why, a commitment to the vision of what it is that you're doing. And it sounds like for you, it was your kids.
Absolutely,
being able to get back to your kids.
Yeah. Now, a lot of people could look at that and say, well, if your kids were so important, why'd you put yourself in that risk in the first place? Right? Mm-hmm. If you knew that there was a chance you weren't going to be there for your children, I could get shot and injured, I could get shot and die, then why did you put yourself in that position in the first place? And it really was ego driven. I love taking on risks, and I'm an adrenaline junkie. I don't shy away from that. But I also had to take a look at taking this risk on. What did it really mean? And if I did die, and this is a conversation I had with my wife prior to the shooting as well, I said, if I die, what are you going to tell my children about the person I am? The reason that I took on a job where I knew I could die. And for me, there was a lot of legacy in it, whether I lived or whether I died, about making a statement about what's important. And for me, I was a police officer already, so looking after community, looking after other people was important to me. This was taking it to another level. And I was making a statement that somebody has to take on these jobs, right? There has to be somebody that does this work. I felt that I could do that work. And so I had to step up and take that responsibility and look after everybody else. And I wanted my wife to tell my children that I died doing something that I was passionate about. And I want them to chase passion, enjoyment in their life. And for me, that's the most important thing, to have that meaning in life as well, that I was contributing to society in the way that I could. Other people are not able to step up to that because they don't have, and this is not a judgment on anybody saying you don't have the skills, because we've got accountants, and accountants would maybe never, the majority of accountants would never go into this environment. There are some accountants that do, and I've got a couple of high-risk, adrenaline-driven mates who are accountants. But you can't throw me into an accountancy, expect me to perform, because that would drive me crazy. It's not my skill set. So we've got to play to our skill set, make sure it's got meaning, and do something that we're congruent with. And if I can leave that legacy to my children to say I was doing something that I was passionate about and I was that committed to it. But it's also about risk management, not risk taking, right? And I make that distinction on a regular basis. I do a lot of risky stuff, but I'm not a risk manager. I don't just go, well, they've done it and they got away with it, I'm going to have a crack at it. It's about saying, what skills do I have? What are my gaps? all those sorts of things, and managing the risk rather than just going, I'm going to take a risk.
I thought it was interesting when I knew we were going to have you as a guest. I set it out to a handful of people, and two of them are both operational leaders, and they keyed right into risk taking versus risk management. Even though I had sent it on two different texts, they both came back with the same thing: risk management. I love that. I love this guy. And so I'm sure they'll be thrilled to hear more about that. But Derrick, I know you're going to come to the United States. Extraordinary. I know you have workshops that help people build human durability and just expand the possibilities. Can you tell us a little bit about, I know you'll be coming in a couple months. I can connect you with all the people who are on the call and help connect you when you're here. But if people want to learn more about you and the things that you're doing, where should they go to find more about you?
Well, obviously my website is there, and the spelling of my name is under my name there. So the website, derrickmcmanus.com. Send me an email, give me a phone call. I am available by Zoom to zoom into anywhere. I'll be in the States probably in July. In fact, that's what I'm targeting. I was just having a conversation with my partner yesterday. She's going, "You're going to be away for your birthday in July?" But definitely in July, I'm going to be there. But prior to that, let's Zoom, as we're doing now. We can have great conversations. Face-to-face is always better. I love it. But I've got another friend that I do work with, and we do high-stakes consulting, and that's either presentations or negotiations or those sorts of things. We Zoomed into South Africa about 3 nights ago. And so this sort of environment is very, very effective. Anything
we live in.
I'm actually happy just to have a conversation about it as we are now, and it doesn't have to be commercially driven, right? If you've got questions, something you'd like to know, please ask me, because I get greater insight from having those discussions too.
I love it. I love it. So DerrickMcManus.com. He's on LinkedIn as well, on Facebook. I would tell you, a great guy to connect with, an amazing perspective. Derrick, before I let you go, I think the last question that I want to ask you is, I'm sure there were a lot of naysayers coming out of the hospital that you wouldn't be able to do this, you wouldn't be able to do that. You talked about basketball. I was on your LinkedIn page. You rode 200 miles, 4 days in a row because you wanted to test your human potential, right? And I love that mindset. But
just pick you up there. I didn't ride it because I wanted to test myself. I had 5 mates and we wanted to go to a cycling event in Melbourne, and we've just gone, let's ride. So I did it for fun. That's how ridiculous and crazy I am. Yeah.
How do you get to the other side? Because, as leaders, there's many, many times that we have doubters or naysayers. What's the story that you told yourself to say, yes, PTSD is an outcome that happens to some people. It's not happening to me. It may not be able to play sports. That's not happening to me. I'm still going to play basketball. I'm still going to go cycle. How did you channel that inner, fight in yourself to come back?
And I'm just writing down a couple of notes that I want to talk to. So the first one was congruence. I was driven, my first drive after being shot was just to get back to my children, just to be able to interact with them. The doctors told me, straight up, they told me I will probably never walk properly again because I've only got, one of the bullets hit my Achilles tendon on the right ankle, took out 80% of the thickness of my Achilles tendon. So they said that Achilles is never going to be strong enough to be able to last again. You won't be able to walk properly. You'll probably trip over your own feet. And so my first driver was just to get back to my children and interact with them. My original plan, absolute perfection. If I can get back to star group, sensational. So that was always in my mind that that's where I'd like to go. But there was this acceptance. The doctors were telling me I probably won't make it. But once I started working through things and started getting a little bit fitter and able to do the running, hopping, skipping, jumping with my children, I started then looking further and going, actually, maybe I can get back to walking greater distances. Maybe I can get back to running. Maybe I can get back to the police. Maybe I can get back to Star Group. And it was just incremental growth the whole way through. But it was that absolute congruence of this is important to me. I wasn't doing it to try and prove it to anybody else. This was a passion for me. I wanted to get there. There was also the vulnerability that if I have a crack at this, I may not make it. I may fail. And the vulnerability to go, well, I'm going to have a crack anyway. And the other one was the passion. It was just that absolute passion. It was, and meaning. It was passion and meaning. It's what was important to me. I needed to balance all that with this is my passion, but how are my choices, my actions, possible consequences going to impact on my family? What's that future going to look like? And so if my family hadn't been able to manage me going back, it was going to negatively impact on them. I had to be vulnerable enough to go, do you know something? I'm going to make the choice to step away. So it was that vulnerability to fail, the vulnerability to change my mind because of other people. But it essentially came down to that congruence. This was what was important to me, and I kept on driving.
I say all the time, I think fulfillment is the highest purpose of your life on your terms. And it is the alignment, the conscious intention to say, here's the impact that I want to go make. Here are the values that I'm going to go live my life by. And here are the actions that I take. And when you put that in alignment, there is just your chest puffs out and you feel like this is what I am made to do and what I should be doing. And that is the most fun that you can have in life. So, yeah. Derrick, as advertised, you have been amazing and terrific, instructional, inspirational. Thank you so much for coming. Everyone else, thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did. Again, DerrickMcManus.com. Go check him out. Send him an email. Send him thank yous. And next week, we have our very own Pablo Gonzalez, probably the fourth smartest marketer in the world behind Chris Walker, Dave Gerhardt, and Chris Lockhead. And so I hope next week you'll get to visit with Pablo Gonzalez. He is one of my favorite people and an inspiration. And man, when you talk about strategic marketing, he is the guy that I want to talk to. So hopefully we'll see you next week. Thanks again.
I'm going to be on that call next week. I'm looking forward to that too.